2015 competition season's NHSDLC's National Championship final round. So, I want to introduce our debaters as well as our judges. So judges, when I call your names out, if you could please stand up. Our first judge is Timothy Lewis. Tim Lewis is the Academic Director of the NHSDLC. He received a BA in History from Bard College and a Master's in Education from Harvard University. Shirley Kwong is a political science and East Asian studies double major at Yale University. She's a member of the Yale Debate Association and participates in both American and British parliamentary debate. Jessica Levy, during high school, Jessica completed on the stage for Walt Whitman. Currently, she serves as the International Curriculum Coordinator for Harvard College Mentors for Urban Debate. Allison Bell is a third year of the College of Arts and Sciences at the University of Pennsylvania. She will be serving as Pen for Youth Debates Voices of Philadelphia Director. Sam Lewis is on the board of the University of Chicago's Debate Society and was a top 10 debater in the National Seats and Debate Association in high school. Rebecca Kwong is the 2013 American National Debate Champion, having won the Tournament of Champions in addition to several other major titles. And lastly, John Harper is currently the program director of the NHSDLC. He's been debating since he was 12 years old. Since then, debating has taken him around the world. At the University of St. Andrews, he joined and eventually helped to run the Union Debating Society, believed to be the oldest student debating society in the world. I'll now take a seat and introduce our debaters. So first, on the audience's left-hand side, we have debaters 294, 295. So on this side, we have Chongqing Bafu, as well as the high school affiliate to South China Normal University. They will be speaking first. They will be representing the con side on the topic. Speaking second, on the pro side of the topic, we have 640, 641, representing Beijing number 171 High School and Liaoning Experimental High School. So our topic for today's debate is that resolved, powerful countries have a responsibility to intervene militarily in foreign countries to prevent or to stop crimes against humanity. So that means that the pro side will be saying that powerful countries do indeed have a responsibility to stop crimes against humanity through military intervention. The con will be saying that powerful countries do not have a responsibility to intervene in foreign countries to stop crimes against humanity. Our debate will begin with the first speech given by the con side. They will explain reasons why you may think that their side is true, using prepared remarks during a constructive speech not to exceed 5 minutes. Yeah, that's fine. Make sure to take the microphone. Yeah. Mr. Speaker, whenever you're ready.
Thanks. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Today we cite countless resolutions. First, we define powerful countries that countries have a prosperous and advancing economy, as well as systematic army, the target countries that go into intervene, and we define crimes against humanity as acts which harm poor people both physically and mentally. Such actions include but not limited to murder, extermination, enslavement, and sexual crimes. We'll provide the following framework. First, countries have a positive obligation toward their citizens. Since people create government to support interests in the first time, so countries should prioritize most of the responsibility to the citizens inside their rim. Secondly, even though countries do have a negative obligation to the citizens outside the states, this kind of negative obligation cannot go as far as military intervention. Condition 1. Military intervention from powerful countries does not fulfill the obligation to protect its own citizens and ultimately hurt them. Subpoint 1. Military intervention costs a large amount of money, which costs burden on citizens' own citizens. A war itself is a huge waste of money because it requires various walks of resources, including but not limited to weapons, supply, infrastructure, and medical equipment. Take the United States, for example. According to the Congressional Budget Office, in the U.S. has spent excessive $767 billion since the United American-led invasion. And yet Iraq's government is still rife with corruption and infighting. The capital of Iraq is still covered by deadly bombings every time. The money US spend is for the tax every citizen pays. So not only the money US spend is not justified, but also it hurts the middle or lower class of American citizens. Like, for another examples, since the powerful country, American soldiers were sent to Iraq, Afghanistan for military intervention during the U.S. operation. According to the figure from Pentagon, around 10,000 soldiers died in Iraq and Afghanistan. The deaths of the soldiers is a disaster to the American family. Destructions of family in local states is undoubtedly an influential part of this so-called humanitarian intervention. Moreover, the costs were not worth its price, so we provide alternatives, such as investing in international health initiatives, sending relief to the victims after the war, or sending the refugees fleeing violent conflict. We save much more money because billions are pulling to the right place rather than military intervention. Subpoint 2. Military intervention will bring damage to the soft power or the image of powerful countries. Because of the failure of any military intervention, the powerful countries are pictured as inhumane and aggressive. When the soft power of the powerful countries is blemished, other countries will be reluctant to cooperate with their countries. The lack of cooperation in the international community will impair the cooperation such as to solve the common problems, such as the environmental problem. Attention 2. Intervening militarily, in reality, destabilizes the local society rather than saving them. Subpoint 1. When a country intervenes in a foreign country and overthrows its government, it will create a power vacuum. Numerous rival groups are trying to fill it. When the central groups are removed by the foreign power, the country will descend into anarchy. Under this circumstance, the country will be divided into several parts. Groups like terrorists will get in. Economic education will be even worse due to the loss of population. As Professor Ernest Campbell shows, while NATO claimed to protect human rights, it bombed the Libyan civilians. Perhaps as many as 2 million Libyan refugees fled to Tunisia. The warlords have taken the power in several parts of the country, making what once relatively homogeneous society to develop into several armed groups. In November, militants claimed affiliation with the ISIS, which is a terrorist group committed such crimes as executing publicly or assassinated activists. So in this case, power vacuum will actually further destabilize the situation rather than saving it. Subpoint 2. Military intervention cannot stop the recurrence of crimes against humanity. When the powerful army got in the way, it may stop the crimes against humanity temporarily. But since the humanitarian intervention never solved the essential problem of this conflict, such as the racial and religious conflicts, it cannot stop the recurrence, and the intervention does not work. In the case of Kosovo, NATO intervened in Kosovo to stop the army committing genocide. They stopped the genocide for a little while. However, Serbian forces came back after NATO retreat and commit even worse genocide. According to the New York Times, an estimated 800,000 Kosovo people became refugees, around 7,000 to 9,000 people were killed. In this case, military intervention never addressed the essential problem of this conflict. It doesn't work ultimately. Subpoint 3. Proclaim the military intervention is humanitarian. However, the cultural clash is ultimately inhumane. Culture is what defines as human. Military intervention from powerful countries resulting in the cultural intervention which forces the ideology into another state. Loss and conflict in the cultural clashes is essentially inhumane. For instance, when the United States invaded Iraq, as Bush administration agreed, the U.S. will try to build a free Iraq with Western ideology to Islamic states, resulting in some systematic destroy of Islam those as forum. Besides, during the war, numerous cultural sites were destroyed. Since culture is unique and what defines us, and the destruction of cultural sites is irreversible. So in this case, military intervention is undoubtedly inhumane. And the Western world believe that democracy will bring peace to a local state. This actually did not work. Because the Western democracy will not work in the Islamic world. It will transform the confrontation inside the Islamic world to the confrontation toward the Western world. And secondly, democracy is very over-demanding. It requires various walks of education or academic background. Dependent citizens that do not have a rigorous democratic training and no democratic education to vote for the president. That's the tyranny, not the president. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for those constructive remarks. We'll now have the constructive speech given by the pro side, which is to the audience's left-hand side, explaining why they believe that this topic is true and why powerful countries do indeed have an obligation to militarily intervene in foreign countries to prevent crimes against humanity. Mr. Speaker, you have 5 minutes whenever you are ready.
Pro side's constructive speech starts now. We start pro on the topic. Resolve. Powerful countries have a responsibility to intervene militarily in foreign countries to stop crimes against humanity. Definition. Crimes against humanity are part of government policy or of a bad practice of justice, tolerated or condoned by the government or de facto authority. These crimes include murder, massacre, dehumanization, extermination, etc. As the inhumane acts reach the threshold of crimes against humanity, if they are part of a widespread or systematic practice. Powerful countries are countries that have a comprehensive natural power that allows them to easily afford the consequences of launching the war. Furthermore, the resolution asks us whether powerful countries have responsibility to intervene, not that we should intervene militarily all the time if there are crimes against humanity. Thus, crucially, if we can prove that in cases when the measures without military intervention won't work or will be less efficient, it's best to include military intervention as a resort for the entire humanity. Contention 1. Powerful countries have moral obligation to stop the cruel and extremely serious crimes against humanity. Subpoint 1. Why intervene? Lottery of birth. People are all born equally, but they can't decide where they live. So there are needs for government to give help to those helpless citizens in foreign countries, where the local government fails to protect its citizens. The fundamental purpose of the concept of sovereignty is created to promote humanity. Since people are born equal and there's no single government that can maximize the utility of all citizens, so different governments are founded in the hope of letting local citizens there pursue maximize happiness. And when the government fails to do so, either by committing crimes against humanity themselves, or by permitting or giving tacit consent to the happening of crimes against humanity, there has to be other governments stepping in to ensure people their fundamental right to live. And in these circumstances, the sovereignty itself is not important anymore because they feel what it's meant for creating sovereignty. Thus, countries are obliged to act to stop crimes against humanity. Subpoint 2. Why powerful governments? Since countries also have responsibilities to their own citizens, powerful countries have the full strength in intervening because all the war scenes that they've done look like skirmishes to them, and it's affordable to them. But small countries might not afford such costs. This means powerful countries should intervene militarily. Subpoint 3. Why moral obligation? Let's take an analogy with a crime committed as a kidnapper, and the citizens being persecuted as hostages. What we would do if they're only pacified, but are capable of saving the hostage, eliminating the kidnapper with no bad consequences or only minor wounds to you. So powerful countries really have a moral obligation to intervene. Contention 2. Why military intervention? Comparative analysis. In some cases, it will be most efficient with military intervention as a resort, with the other methods functioning at the same time. We protect civilians from targeted or systematic attacks using a variety of diplomatic, economic, and military methods. And these methods were rarely used in isolation. But none of them would be adequate if the devil declines to cooperate. So there has to be a cohesive force to bring peace back to its own citizens. For example, economic sanctions are ineffectual in situations when countries like DPRK disconnect all its information from supervised and starts to squeeze and oppress their own people. And it would have been inadequate to use other kind of measures to strike ISIS, which countries like Iraq, Syria, and Libya want to have no control of. In these situations, military intervention is the only way. So military intervention is really indispensable. Contention 3. Military intervention removes the potential threat for powerful countries. Not only do powerful countries hold responsible for the global citizens, they also hold a large portion of responsibility to their own people. Thus, it will be a win-win situation if they can protect the people elsewhere and meantime eradicate evil forces to provide long-term safety to powerful countries themselves. Think of ISIS, the terror organization that is currently being targeted and attacked by powerful countries like the United States. What will happen if it acquires nearby countries that have no ability to defend themselves? The ISIS will definitely cut its resources and gain stronger. And what if they even capture countries like Iran, which is said to have nuclear weapons? It will be a huge catastrophe for the entire human being. This is called slippery slope. If powerful countries do nothing now, they will regret it later. They do it not only for the safety of other countries' fellow citizens, but also mainly for themselves. Prevention is always better than the war. So powerful countries really have a responsibility to intervene militarily in order to promote long-term peace needed to develop itself. Also, I'd like to address some points that our opponents have said. They said about the insustainability of the military intervention. However, contention 2, I already talked about we have so many methods for military intervention that can be executed together, that can first stop the crimes and then improve the living conditions of those intervening areas. We're not just saying that we use only military intervention, we're using a combination of many methods. Also, they talk about cultural clash, which I think is so interesting because without military intervention, there will be cultural clash. There's cultural clash everywhere because within the era of globalization, we now experience cultural clash every minute in every second. And I don't think it's caused by military intervention. But that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for those remarks. We're now entering entering the crossfire period of the debate. Does either team require preparation time before crossfire?
No.
Pro side, do you require preparation time before crossfire? Okay, we'll now have a crossfire period between the two of constructive speakers. Both speakers will have the opportunity to ask each other questions and answer questions from the opposing side. The con speaker that spoke first will have the right to ask the first question. I would kindly remind the audience that although crossfire is an especially interesting part of the debate, we would really discourage you from commenting and speaking to each other, particularly in a loud voice during the course of the crossfire. Please remain silent during the crossfire as it becomes difficult for the judges to hear the debaters. I'd also remind the debaters that microphones do tend to pick up your voices quite loudly, so please refrain from yelling into the microphone. We have 3 minutes for the crossfire. Con side, your first question. Both debaters, please stand whenever you're ready.
The first question, can you clarify your framework for me?
Framework is the overall benefits of global citizens. Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
So, do you think military intervention can be used as a last resort?
Military intervention cannot be used as last resort. Because military, I'm answering the question. Military intervention will harm the people both inside the local states but citizens outside the state. If you consider military intervention, which is the worst solution to crimes against humanity, as the resort to stop crimes against humanity, this is definitely not the case. You intend to do something which have very bad consequences.
I didn't answer my question. My question is why isn't can be used as a resort, as a last resort? But not
because military intervention will exacerbate crimes against humanity eventually, both harm its own citizens and harm the citizens.
Then how do you want to attack ISIS using peaceful measures?
You know how ISIS emerged in the first time? It's because the United States intervened in the first place.
So you're saying that ISIS exists because of military intervention?
Exactly.
Then military intervention can be used to solve the ISIS problem.
Using violence to stop violence, as you mentioned before, it's a slippery slope. Using violence to stop violence, we cannot stop it.
Please don't interrupt me. That using violence against violence.
Please don't interrupt me. Using violence to stop violence is a slippery slope, as you mentioned before. Military intervention will cause the hatred inside the Islamic world. As ISIS slogan is, they want to throw all the Western world and create Islamic empire.
Right, so you're saying all wars are unjust and immoral, right?
Sorry, what?
So all of the wars are immoral by your state.
What kind of immoral war are you talking about?
You're saying using violence against violence is immoral, right?
Yes, exactly. So
then all the wars are using violence against violence, right?
I'm sorry, what?
All the wars are using violence against
all the world.
Wars.
Wars?
Yeah.
So, okay. Do you consider that if you military intervene, it will exacerbate the situation rather than saving it? There are only 27 terrorist groups in 2007. However, there are more terrorist groups nowadays, such as the emergence of ISIS.
I don't think you're answering my question. Do you have that question?
Of course. Why do you think people create government in the first place?
What?
Why do you think people create government in the first place?
Because to promote humanity.
Yeah, people will create government to support their own interests, right?
Well, not necessarily.
Can you blame the mother?
Their purpose is not necessarily the consequence. Now, when the sovereignty fails to protect the humanity,
I'm not talking about sovereignty. I'm not talking about sovereignty, am I? I want to ask you a question. I'm not blaming the mother for being immoral if the mother chooses to raise her own child instead of the neighbor's child. Can you blame the mother for being immoral to raise her own child instead of her neighbor's child?
We can't blame the parents.
Well, exactly. So government should prioritize responsibility to their own citizens instead of citizens outside the states. Correct?
Well, I think we're talking about two different questions. What we are talking about is to stop crimes against humanity. And the idea you just extended is stop crimes against humanity. But by
this time, thank you.
Thank you.
We're now entering the rebuttal phase of the debate. During the rebuttals, each debating team will respond to their opponent's cases, giving responses and attacks against the particular arguments that their opponents raised during the constructive speech. Con speaker, do you require any preparation time?
Yeah, 1 minute and half.
Okay, I'll call it out in 30-second increments.
Thank you.
The con side requires 1 minute of preparation time. If the audience could remain silent during that preparation time, that would be very much appreciated.
30 seconds used. One minute has been used. Do you need any more time?
30 seconds.
Okay. That's 1 minute, 30 seconds used. Okay, we'll now have the first rebuttal given by the second speaker of the con team. She'll be responding to constructive arguments raised by the pro team. Her speech will last 4 minutes. Madam Speaker, whenever you're ready.
Honorable judges and dear ready? So, first, addressing the opponent's framework, I have two responses. The first one is that never a moral or legal obligation should be justified if the end is bad. And also, our side will win if we prove that the military intervention will actually harm internally and externally. So, first, addressing the opponent's first intervention, I have three responses. The first one is that indeed, there are no referred. However, it actually did not prove that, however, the powerful countries only have the positive obligation towards their own citizens. However, they never have the positive obligation, which is the military intervention, to the outside world. So you didn't actually provide any words to prove that. And also, our sides have already proved that the military intervention will inherently infringe their own citizens' positive obligation. So therefore, the military intervention will never be justified as a moral obligation, as we have already provided examples in our constructive speech, that it will actually increase a huge amount of economic crisis, and it will inherently harm those people because those soldiers are actually suffering and their families are actually suffering. So the cost will not actually be shouldered by those powerful countries. And secondly, specifically addressing the point of the sovereignty, I want to say that indeed sovereignty does not matter if we prove that military intervention is inherently bad. And I was already proved that. And also, addressing the point of the ability, I have one response that powerful countries have this kind of ability does not mean that they shoulder the positive obligation to militarily intervene, because they will actually harm internally and externally, and specifically in the example of Kosovo, that after powerful countries militarily intervene, it actually leads to larger scales of genocides inside of the country of Kosovo, and indeed those powerful countries are suffering from the cause internally. And addressing our dear opponent's second contention, I have two responses. The first one is that we don't need to care about those alternatives as long as we prove that the military intervention is bad. However, specifically addressing the example of the DPRK, you don't actually provide any counterfactuals to prove that the military intervention will actually, after the military intervention, they will lead to bad consequences. However, our side have already proved that after the military intervene, the DPRK will actually use the atomic bombs in order to lead to a mass destruction. So this is a further worse end if we militarily intervene. So addressing our third contention, I have three responses. The first one is that if we militarily intervene, it will lead to further potential threats, both internally and externally, because of the cultural clashes. When the powerful countries militarily intervene, they will spread out Christianity and Western thought. And this will create further conflicts inside of the cultural complexity in the failed state, because they already suffered from Sunni and Shiite conflicts, and they already suffered from the overall Islamic conflicts with the Christianity. So if we mix democracy and also the Christianity inside of there, they will actually engender further hatred as well as further terrorism. As we have already proved, after the powerful countries militarily intervene overall, the terrorism is actually increasing 13.6%, according to the Cambridge University research program. So therefore, our science have already proved that because the military intervention is actually harming externally and internally, and never and also a moral or legal obligation should never justify if the end is not good, and it will inherently harm the countries. So therefore, our side again. Thank you.
Thank you for that rebuttal speech. We now will have the pros rebuttal speech. Pro side, you need preparation time. Okay, I'll let you know in 30-second increments. Pro will be taking 1 minute of preparation. That's 45 seconds. That's 1 minute use. Do you need any more time? Okay. That's 1 minute and other things. Okay, we'll now have the rebuttal speech given by the second speaker of the pro team. Madam Speaker, you have 4 minutes whenever you're ready.
Ready? Opponents ready? First of all, I would like to rebut our opponent's framework. They said they only care about their own citizens and their framework. However, the own citizens' life is extremely important. However, our contention, the last contention, is providing a win-win situation. We stated that we fear the threat both for domestic citizens and also in the foreign countries. So why should we interfere? Because we're also protecting citizens within our territory. So we believe that we will have better framework because we consider all situations. We believe that when other measures are exhausted, we disability need intervention to stop the crimes to save more lives. And that's why we focus on the overall benefit, and it's more important. All of the first contention harms own citizens. As we stated that the state should not harm domestic citizens if people just leave the crimes alone and do not military interfere. The answer is no. Well, our opponent is telling you how military intervention is not bad in causing casualties. However, they ignore the situations without military intervention. And we do prove that during the Rwanda genocide, estimated 500,000 to 1 million Rwandans was killed by the Hutu majority in less than 100 days. And constituting as much as 70% of Tutsi and 20% of Rwanda's total population. You can see that when there's no intervention, criminals would do whatever they want without concern. And in inhumanity, if innocent civilians would be the victims, would bear all the consequences. And instead, Pro would avoid this problem because we believe intervention could stop the exaggerated war and minimize the damages. All of their first contention, supplement A, they can provide alternative sources that save refugees. However, they fail to provide can these alternative sources actually stop the crimes? The answer is no. Maybe they can save some lives, but more lives are being killed because they cannot actually stop people from being killed. And cooperation. People can't cooperate and negotiate peacefully with ISIS and our terrorists. That's why we desperately need intervention to stop their crimes, because we cannot negotiate with them peacefully, and we do not have a peaceful treatment. And all of your stating contention, this stabilized. Well, I would like to ask, can it be stabilized when people just do nothing? Of course, no. Their first suffering, your innocent people being killed. Well, I would like to say, if powerful countries do not choose to intervene, then they are choosing these people, this target countries to die. So they are making a choice as well. So they are committing crimes in the first place because they're choosing people die and do nothing. And all of their stating suffering be, they say that their intervention cannot solve the problems sometimes. However, we're not saying that intervention is the only way. We're saying that when measures lack of intervention, lack of enforcement, and without intervention, when other ways are exhausted, we have to use intervention. All of their last petition, cultural clash. I was glad that our opponents bring out the Iraq example. However, this example is irrelevant because when U.S. intervened Iraq is aiming not to humanitarian protection, which is irrelevant to our topic today. Our topic is humanitarian protection, and the Iraq aim is for oil profit and other nuclear secret programs. And also, our opponents say that democracy is over demanding. However, our definition of powerful country is the country that has the ability to bear all the consequences for launching the war. And also, if all powerful countries take the responsibility seriously, and also globalization put the countries share common interests, then the powerful countries can take their responsibility seriously, then it will not be over demanding if they can cooperate well and stop crimes against humanity together. And your first rebuttal, it's not moral if we answer that. I would like to say, well, even if there's some failed examples, but that doesn't mean countries lose responsibility. The responsibility always exists, even if there's some failed examples. Thank you.
And that concludes the rebuttal phase of the debate. We'll now have a crossfire, the same as the first crossfire, only between the second two speakers which gave the rebuttals. Madam Speakers, do you need any preparation time before crossfire?
No.
Preparation time? Okay, we'll now begin the crossfire between the two rebuttal speakers lasting for 3 minutes. I'd like to also remind the audience, please remain silent throughout the duration of the debate. Thank you very much. The debaters here are under an immense amount of pressure, and they really, really appreciate a quiet audience. Thanks a lot. Madam Speakers, you have 3 minutes. Consign your first question whenever you're ready.
Okay, my dear opponents, do you think a thing that will internally and externally harm our government is a win-win situation?
What do you mean by that? Do you mean intervention harms both situations?
Yes, as I have already proved in my rebuttal, as well as in the
Do you have any examples for that?
Well, that is exactly what I want. Examples in the Kosovo, Somalia, as well as in examples in the Arabian world, that we can see the cultural clashes is very exacerbated because of the military intervention.
Well, do you know that ISIS is actually committing crimes and also clashing the old buildings in Iraq and the Asian buildings? So terrorists is committing crimes. So the reason why there's cultural clash is because when terrorists committing crimes, powerful countries, there's no intervention, so they're committing crimes. So if powerful countries take the responsibility to military interfere, then the cultural clash would be avoided because powerful countries are saving the culture. And I have a question for you.
Yes.
I have a question for you. Can you provide any alternative way that is better than military intervention can save more lives and stop crimes against humanity?
So you asked me for the alternatives?
Yes.
Well, I have already proved that in my rebuttal that we don't need to care about the alternatives as long as we prove that
I didn't hear
military
that, but
intervention is bad.
you just stated, your partner stated in his first constructive speech that there are alternatives better than intervention can save refugees and protect these. Do you mean that this petition doesn't?
Well, because I think, thank you, because I think this is a double layer rebuttal because I first want to prove that as long as we don't prove, as long as we prove that the military intervention is bad, that we don't need to care about the alternatives.
Okay,
so I just now the question for you. Thank you. That you said that in your rebuttal that the cooperation is extremely effective. So why don't we use the cooperation instead of the military intervention?
Because the situation we consider, yeah, of course we do use cooperation sometimes, but we're talking about cases when other means are all exhausted. nothing or just sit and die, that's committing crimes as well. And I have a question for you.
Yes.
Do you mean in your rebuttal, do you mean if the ends are bad, then you would never use mutilation just because it has sometimes has bad consequences?
Well, because first, in our side, we prove that the country only have a positive obligation towards their own citizens. However, our side already proved that the military intervention will inherently harm the powerful countries so much, and it will further harm externally as well. So why wouldn't we use? Why do you think this is a moral obligation?
So do you mean just because the results are bad, you're never using it?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, that's time. We're now entering the summary.
30 seconds, please.
Right, you're one step ahead of me. We're now entering the summary speech phase of the debate. The con speaker does require preparation time. It'll take 30 seconds. The audience can remain silent. We'd appreciate it. Thanks. That's 30 seconds.
10 seconds. 10 seconds more. Thanks.
Okay, we're now entering the summary speech phase of the debate. We'll now have the first summary speech given by the con first speaker. He will have a maximum of 2 minutes to deliver his summary speech. Mr. Speaker, you have 2 minutes whenever you're ready.
Thanks. During this summary speech, I want to first address a point about obligation. First, we never say the country government do not have the obligation towards citizens outside the states. We just think the negative obligation should not go as far as military intervention, because negative obligation have to be protected by not violating the human rights of other countries. And my opponents actually wrongly equate ability with duty. They think that powerful countries have the ability, so they should intervene. This is definitely a logic fallacy I have to point out. And then, here's a fine line between murder and duty. Logically speaking, it's often wrong to use the human lives as a means to achieve a certain goal. For example, in the United States, the drone strike, they kill terrorists and innocent civilians at the same time. If this is morally justified, I don't think the military intervention is no different than terrorism. Secondly, if the terrorism, this is exactly our point. Because terrorism is engendered by power vacuum. What creates the power vacuum? Military intervention. When military intervention overthrows the local government, the country will be divided into several parts. Like this example from Yugoslavia. When the dictator Tito died in the 1980s, Yugoslavia disintegrated and contained several parts, and Serbian groups and Croatian people committed genocide against each other. Because there were central governments, there were so absolute laws, still terrorist groups were trying to fill in. And actually, ISS is the perfect example of the consequences of using violence to stop violences. And then I will address my points about win-win situation. They think that the people in the local states support their government's own interests, but that's not true. Because in 2008, less than 20% of the Bush administration, the people think that less than 20% of people think this is the right thing to intervene in Iraq. Because they prepared the money, they prepared their soldiers, they should put distraction in their local family. And then I want to discuss the point about the removed threat in the U.S. As I mentioned before, terrorism is the direct consequences of using military intervention to stop crimes against humanity. So terrorism only increased, not decreased. Since before the 9/11, there's Al Qaeda, but now besides Al Qaeda, you have ISS. ISS slogan is to overthrow the Western government and to build an Islamic empire. This is actually the hatred directly from the Western countries' military intervention. Much.
Summary speech delivered by the pro side. Pro speakers, do you complete part time? Okay, counting 1 minute. Seconds. That's 1 minute used. Do you need any more? Okay. We'll now have the summary speech given by the second speaker of the pro team. His summary speech will also last for 2 minutes. Mr. Speaker, whenever you're ready.
So before I start, I'll just address my opponent's rebuttal speech and then I'll address their summary speech. So, minutes of summary for both sides starts now. So in the first rebuttal, they say that the humanitarian intervention should be justified at the end of that. I have two rebuttals for that. The first is that we're talking about responsibility, which is a moral issue. So the cover is more important than the end. And second, let's take an analogy with a policeman wants to save the hostage with it being controlled by a killer. Then it has to shoot. But once it is, that means the hostage might be killed. But that doesn't mean that the policeman doesn't have the responsibility to save the hostage. Also, after second rebuttal, they say that countries should only be responsible to their own citizens, and it will be a infringement in their own citizens if they do American invasion. Our third contention has a perfect reputation of that because we're saying that it removes another threat of our country if they do military invasion. Also, it will be so hurtful and cruel if they see the crimes and do nothing because they provide no alternative. Because we have to compassion with Nazis all the time, and when there's no alternative, they have to provide alternative. And because there's no other methods, they can actually save our human life. That's why even if there's bad consequences about military invasion, we're still going to use it. And for their third rebuttal about summary about the further skills of genocide. First of all, they provide no evidence of genocide after invasion. Second of all, we have already provided a solution that is we can use other measures such as federal aid, such as non-clothing audits as well to provide long-term stability. After the fourth rebuttal, saying that they don't have to provide alternatives, I think it's totally ridiculous. And for the fifth rebuttal about the board E, for the potential threat, because of the counter fact, I would say that if you do nothing at the first time, then the small force will become your rebel. Then the threat is not a threat, it's a rebel. It can destroy you at any time. Also, after the first summaries, they talk about the difference between ability and duty. I would have to say that when the top country have ability and has their interest to both the foreign citizens and also the domestic citizens, then they should be.
Concludes the summary speech phase of the debate. We'll now begin the grand crossfire. Does either team need preparation time before grand crossfire?
No.
Are you guys good on prep time? Okay. We'll now have the grand crossfire involving all debaters. It will last for 3 minutes as well. Just as with the previous crossfires, the first speaking team, the con side, will be able to ask the first question. Debaters, you have 3 minutes whenever you're ready.
Thank you. My first question is, do you think spreading democracy in the Islamic world is a good idea?
What?
Do you think spreading, I'm not saying speaking very fast, I'm saying spreading the democracy idea to the Islamic world is a good idea?
I think this is irrelevant to our topic.
Why not?
We're talking about whether we should military stop crimes against humanity, but not whether we should give a democracy to a terrorist government.
Well, my dear opponent, indeed,
Can I have a question for you?
Well, I'm answering your question.
I didn't have a question for you yet.
Well, could you actually let me finish first? Well, because what our dear opponent said is wrong, because indeed it is relevant, because you have already admitted that the democracy is not suitable for those Islamic words. However, when you militarily intervene, the democracy will naturally spread to them, and therefore causing a huge amount of hatred, terrorism, and the other
So I
bad
have a question for you.
Yes.
So, do you think it's reasonable for the survey of your approaches and message when you say that less of 20% of the total population go just supports the intervention? If the soldiers die at their families, do you think they have every reason to protest?
I'm sorry, what?
So you're saying about less than 20% of the total population actually supports the intervention?
Yes, because the argument that before the
Because
2018...
their families as soldiers are being killed. Half the risk of being killed.
Okay, my opponent just arguing that 80% of American population are soldiers. And okay, and
No,
I'm not saying before the 2008 presidential election, the argument that the Democratic Party make is that it will pull back the Iraqi forces from Iraq back to the states, and this will a whole appeal to their voters. This is actually out of there.
The soldiers' casualties, sometimes the figures kind of intimidated the American people.
Yes, because this is why they vote for the Democratic
Then
Party.
the soldiers should fight for their own country and should also fight for foreign countries in order to promote peace, in order to protect civilian lives.
So what's your question again?
Do you think soldiers have responsibility to fight for both their countries and for foreign countries?
Yeah,
to stop
indeed, they
fighting?
have the responsibility. But the responsibility is justified by the humanitarian grounds. This kind of obligation should be shouldered by the government, and this government should be blamed by military commission.
And also, I have something to add. Indeed, the soldiers have this kind of responsibility. However, it's based on one premise that the war is actually justified. However, you don't actually justify that they have the military intervention as a moral obligation. But
Do you
therefore,
think
this
it's
is not
moral just to see him die and do nothing?
We are facing a situation where some other solutions and the worst solution. A worst solution is military intervention. We're choosing from those solutions and the worst solution. Which better to those solutions?
Thank you.
That is time. Thank you. We're now entering the last period of the debate, the final focus speeches. Pro side, con side, you have 1 minute and 50 seconds remaining. Would you like to use that prep time?
Yeah, all of it.
Okay. That's 1 minute used, 50 seconds remaining. Thanks.
I think I can speak now.
Okay. So we'll now have the final focus speech given by the con speaker, which will last for 2 minutes. Madam Speaker, whenever you're ready.
So basically, this is very interesting ground. However, here's the reason why I decided shall win. Here are two voting issues. The first one is that neither a moral nor a legal obligation should be lead to a bad and inhumane end, no matter how the intention is viewed. Efforts that definitely win this voting issue since first would prove that both defensively and offensively prove that military intervention will spread out terrorism. Military intervention will actually engender a huge amount of death, and it will lead to power vacuums, anarchy, and also it will lead to the soft power containment. However, our dear opponents don't actually address our points of the cultural conflicts and soft power containment. And this is a huge deal because this can never be solved by the cooperation because the cultural conflict is deep rooted since the medieval age. However, after the countries militarily intervene, the deep rooted conflicts will exacerbate because military intervention the military intervention will spread out Western ideas which is not suited in the failed states. And also, our dear opponents fails to refute our framework offensively. However, our side shows that the power countries only have the positive obligation towards their own citizens, but a negative obligation to the outside world. However, our dear opponents never refute this point, so our side shall win in our framework. So therefore, all of the contentions are rooted out because we don't actually link their impact to into our framework. Contrarily, our side's wins to improve first, the military intervention will not only harm externally, but also harm internally. So therefore, our side shall win. Thank you.
Thank you for that final focus speech. We'll now have the pros final focus speech. Pros team, you have 1 minute and 30 seconds remaining. Would you like all that prep time? All right, we'll count 1 minute and 30 seconds of prep time for the pro side. We'll now have the final speech of the debate, the final focus speech given by the pro side. Madam Speaker, you have 2 minutes whenever you're ready.
Judges ready? Opponents ready? First of all, I'll tell you why our opponents didn't prove it framework, and secondly, why we should win this round. First, 5 voting issues. First, our framework is more important. Our opponent's framework is intervention harms domestic citizens. However, we proved that without intervention, it would be more harmful to domestic citizens. And secondly, they're telling you how bad intervention is, like destabilize foreign countries. However, they didn't prove that these intervention actually, why did they harm domestic citizens? And we do prove in our last contention that because of intervention, we remove potential threats, and this is actually helping domestic citizens, ensuring their security. And third, our opponents said the destabilizing costs are only in short term. However, we're focusing on the long term, and military intervention can bring a long-term stabilize. If we do nothing, the war will only exaggerate nor report being killed. And the number 4 voting issues, our opponents didn't tell us why powerful countries should not have the responsibility. However, we put our reverse contention because people have the right to live and they're more equal. So government should have fulfilled the obligation to protect the fundamental right to live. And our opponents tell you because the consequences are bad, but this cannot deny the responsibility. One field example cannot make powerful countries lose all the responsibility because humanity is important. So we should always protect people's fundamental right to live. And the last voting issue is our opponents felt applied and obviated means that is better than intervention, can actually save more lives and more efficient. So that's why I think Con didn't prove the framework. And we did prove our framework. Our first framework, countries have a responsibility because people have the right to live and more equal. And also powerful countries do have the ability to fulfill this responsibility. Second condition, when other measures are exhausted, intervention is most efficient, and our opponents never attack rebuttal this second contention. And the last is intervention removes potential threat. So that's why I think we should win this round. Thank you.
Excellent debate. Please shake hands. And that concludes our 2015 National High School Debate League of China's National Championship Final Round. congratulate our debaters. These debaters were put under an immense amount of pressure to debate in front of you guys, and I think they performed exceptionally well. So congratulations, guys. You are now officially off the hook. You may have a seat in the front row.